Hey gamers, in this video, I'm gonna share my thoughts on each boss in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and rank their difficulty level. For those who haven't played the game, this will give you an idea of what to expect. And for those who have played, let's see if we have similar thoughts. But let me give a heads up first. This is totally based on my personal experience, my subjective evaluation, so it might be very different from yours. The rating criteria is roughly subjective feeling multiplied by 1.75. Plus the number of attempts multiplied by 1.5, plus the time spent multiplied by 1. My subjective feeling weight is the highest, so my opinion counts the most. Gamers Cheetah. Alright, it's time to reveal my boss rankings. First off, this is just for the main bosses, not including the mini-bosses. I haven't started my second playthrough yet, so I might have missed some bosses that aren't on my list. The easiest boss is definitely the folding screen monkeys. It just takes some time and there's really no challenge to it. Same goes for the divine dragon. It's nothing too difficult. Moving up to the E rank, since monkey or dragon is somehow not like a true boss, the easiest boss for me in this game was the corrupted monk. It's super slow, full of flaws and loopholes, and just super easy to beat. The only 1 HP bar makes it even easier. I only died once or twice before beating it. I was actually surprised when I got the memory item from it. I thought it's just a mini boss or something, not a main boss. It was way much easier than most of the mini bosses in this game. Now, onto the next level. The first main boss, Jayabu Masataka Onuwa, was actually pretty challenging. It was a surprise to see a horseback fight as the first boss, and I thought I had to knock him off his horse before being able to attack. But after a while, I realized his movements were actually not very fast and his attacks were easy to block. He even gives you a break by letting you recover your posture. It took me about half an hour to beat him, but it was a really fun fight and definitely left a lasting impression. Next up was the true corrupted monk. It was a bit stronger than the corrupted monk, but the strategy to beat him was pretty much the same. He was also super slow, slower than my grandpa, but it had some deceptive moves that could catch you off guard. However, with a bit of patience, it wasn't too difficult and I was able to beat it in about half an hour or so. Alright, from C rank and up, it took me at least an hour to beat each boss. Lady Butterfly is a pretty special boss. You can actually fight her very early on in the game. I fought her myself at a really early stage and was shocked by her difficulty. I died over and over again. Took me more than an hour and still couldn't beat her. Every time I got to the second phase, I just died instantly. Later on, I realized she's not a boss in main story and I could come back to fight her later, so I just gave up. Then, when I played the game much later, I decided to give it another shot, but it turned out to be way too easy. I only tried like 3 or 4 times and got it done. Lady Butterfly's attack pace is really hard to predict. Sometimes you think you can go for a sword fight with her, and then she suddenly kicks you. And when you try to dodge, she starts attacking you with her dagger trying to have a sword fight with you. The dagger she's holding is too small, so it's really hard to tell what kind of attack she's going to do, and it keeps interrupting your own attack pace. But she's surprisingly easy to beat using a sneaky hit and run tactic. If you fight her very early on, just keep running around her and wait for her to do the jump attack. Then, quickly attack her a few times and repeat. It requires some patience, but it's not too hard. In her second phase, she adds a lot of butterfly magic that chases you, making it even harder to attack. And when she disappears and keeps shooting butterflies at you, it's really easy to make a mistake and take some major damage. Overall, I think she's a boss that apparently starts to get difficult. Alright, next, I rate the boss battle against Game Ichiro as a B rank. It was so much fun and really tests your understanding of the game. The attack patterns are so varied, with so many different patterns and things to learn. At the beginning, I was really shocked by its difficulty. I tried all sorts of strategies, thinking that dodging and running away would be easier, but it didn't work well. In the end, I found that using my sword and perfect parries was the best way to go. It was much easier and more efficient to block his attacks and counterattack than to dodge them. The most difficult part was shooting arrows. It was so frustrating. The aiming was really short and fast. and it broke my concentration, making it really hard to react. After trying to beat him over 30 times, I was hardly ever hit by his sword attacks, but still got hit by arrows 90% of the time. It really tests her reaction speed. It took me about 1 or 2 hours to finally reach the third phase. I thought there were only 2 phases, but when I saw the third phase, I was totally shocked. I was struggling to survive and had no healing item left. I was just too weak to continue the fight. I saw the third phase several times and was immediately killed, without a chance to learn how to beat it. But after a few more attempts, I realized that the third phase was actually the easiest. The lightning reversal technique was a gift, and it was actually very easy to perform. It also dealt massive damage to his health and posture, and I could attack him several times before he could retaliate. If you play it safe and keep only using the lightning reversal technique in the fight, you can win easily. I must have spent at least 3 hours trying to beat him. This is the second most enjoyable boss battle in the whole game, and it left a deep impression on me. Game Ichiro is really a great teacher, and after beating this battle, I felt that my skills and understanding of the game had improved significantly. Here's A rank and above this level. All the bosses have made me feel hopeless. Every boss fight wasn't something I could tackle in one go. I had to take breaks and go for a walk or even take a nap to recharge myself. First up is Great Shinobi Owl. Holy crap, this one's too difficult. I was so frustrated and got mad with it. It's been a long time since a game made me that mad. It has so many heavy attacks that push you away and leave you in a big stun. At first, I thought that you couldn't beat this boss by parrying his attack and that it was encouraging players to run around. I tried running for almost 2 hours with the hit and run tactic, but I kept getting hit by its long-distance quick strikes. Since you can't block while running, even if you see it coming, it's too late to block. If you get hit, it's a whole combo without mercy, so the game is over when it chased me. The range of its chase attack was so wide that it was further than how it looks like, almost the entire battlefield. You could only avoid it by standing diagonally opposite it. It was ridiculous. Anyway, after 2 hours, I finally thought, okay, maybe I should try to fight it by a normal way, just parry his attack. Surprisingly, it became simple then. Although I kept getting knocked out, my posture gauge went down much slower than his. Even if I couldn't block it perfectly, he would often deplete his posture gauge before mine. Furthermore, you don't even have to consume its health bar too aggressively. As soon as you deplete a little bit of its health bar, its posture gauge will suddenly become much easier to deplete. You just need to concentrate on blocking and fighting with the sword. After switching to a blocking tactic, I won in about half an hour. I can only say that choosing the right strategy is really important. Choosing is more important than trying hard. If you can't beat a boss for a long time, just try a completely different strategy. It could change everything. Next up is my pain, the Guardian Ape. This one really made me so angry. It almost had no stun throughout the fight and was not fighting with the sword like a typical Sekiro boss fight. Although its attack pattern wasn't difficult to grasp, the movement wasn't fast, and even the damage wasn't high, but somehow I couldn't keep up with its moves. Every time I find a good moment, I want to hit him a few more times, but my attempts always bring me down. In this boss fight, I kept switching between the hit and run tactic in close combat, and I couldn't decide. I felt like both weren't easy but weren't difficult either. I really didn't know how to fight it. This one made me so angry. I probably spent more than 2 hours on it and finally figured out its pattern. Even though I figured out the pattern, I was often taken down by a small mistake or greed for one more hit. The second phase is also damn annoying. He finally attempts to fight using a sword, but he twists like a snake, not fighting me head on. The pace of his moves is so weird and tricky, making me confused. Should I keep using hit and run tactics or face it head on with my sword? Both seem to work and not work at the same time. It seems to have a lot of openings for me to attack, but greedily taking a swing will cost me dearly. It's driving me super frustrated. It really got on my nerves. Although I surprisingly didn't spend too much time on it, maybe about 2 or 3 hours, it felt like 20 or 30 hours. I even considered taking a long break from this game. Okay, last one is S rank, the 3 toughest bosses in the game, in my opinion. First is the Demon of Hatred, which is similar to the Guardian Ape. Not quite like a Sekiro boss. He's not interested in fighting you with swords, which made it a painful fight for me. The boss moves quite fast, and you need to react quickly. There's a combo of 4 attacks: left hand, right foot, left hand, which I eventually got familiar with, but still made mistakes. The pace is just so weird. It's actually a slow combo with a long wind-up, so there should be enough reaction time, but the wind-up is just too long sometimes. You suddenly can't catch the timing. And every time I dodged too early, I got hit instead. The pace is fast and slow, trying to mess with the player's timing. Like the ape, there seem to be many openings, trying to make you greedy for more hits. I think over 70% of my deaths were due to being too greedy. But the most annoying thing is probably his long-range attack with fireballs. When you see the fireball, it's almost too late to react. I don't know whether to approach him or wait for him to come. I always feel like I'm in trouble. There's a chance of being hit by a fireball anytime. Even after defeating him, I still didn't fully understand how to handle the fireballs. It also took some luck to finally win, which made me feel like this boss is not quite like a Sekiro boss. Alright, so now let's talk about my experience beating the second hardest and final boss in the game, Ishin, the Sword Saint. Before you fight him though, you gotta take down Game Ichiro, Way of Tama. This time around, Game Ichiro is way easier than last time. If he were a standalone boss, he might be the easiest one to beat without taking any damage in the entire game. But even though he's easy, the learning curve can be a bit shaky. I got a bit frustrated by him at first because he's still quick with his arrows and moves, and requires quick reflexes. I died like 10 times and it took me about half an hour to beat him, but once I got the hang of it, I was able to beat him without taking any damage pretty frequently. Next up is the legendary final boss, Sword Saint Ishin. When I first encountered him, I was really shocked by how difficult it is. I was like, what? I don't believe any human being can defeat him. He looked calm and collected, yet his attacks were fierce and he had very few flaws. He had a wide variety of attacks, and it was hard to figure out his patterns. His attack and movement styles were also pretty complex. His only weakness was a charged strike, but surprisingly it was not that easy to dodge. His attack range was very wide, and I often thought I dodged it but actually didn't. It took me about an hour and over 20 tries to carefully observe his movements and find his flaws, but I made little progress. Finally, I decided to stop being cautious and just go all out on him. It turned out to be surprisingly effective. Don't let him control the pace of the battle. Take charge yourself and force him to attack. As long as he's not attacking you, just go for it and hit him, making him defend. His defense movements are very predictable, so I kept getting close to him and attacking. This strategy greatly reduced the difficulty. I tried it about 5 times and successfully reached his second phase. The difficulty level in his second phase was on a completely different level. He not only had a long spear but also a handgun. Isn't that too much? Doesn't that disgrace his title as a sword saint? In his second phase, he wielded a sword and a long spear, and attacked both from afar and up close. He even used his handgun to interrupt her healing. His attack patterns were constantly changing, making it extremely difficult. The close-range strategy was not very effective in this phase because he often countered with a sideways jump. However, you couldn't stay too far away from him either because his long-range attacks were even harder to deal with. You had to maintain a moderate distance, relying on quick reflexes to deal with his fierce attacks. Don't release the defense button too early because he had a lot of combos, and his final move was a deadly thrust. I figured out his combo patterns and counterattacked him with that thrust, which was very effective in reducing his health. In the end, the third phase was basically the same as the second phase, but the appearance of his lightning sword technique actually made the difficulty drop significantly. You could deal a lot of damage to him while avoiding his attacks by using lightning reversal. It was one of the most fun boss battles I've ever played. And Sword Saint Ishin definitely lived up to his title as the final boss with a high difficulty level but not too weird attack pattern. Each defeat only made me more determined to challenge him again. Lastly, the boss that I personally felt was even harder than Ishin is the Headless Ape. I really don't want to dwell on this boss battle too much because it seriously drove me crazy. I was stuck on it for over 3 to 4 hours. The reasons for my frustration are basically the same as with the Guardian Ape. But what made it even more frustrating was that after depleting 1 health bar, a second ape appeared. It was just too much, like they were playing a prank on me. It's funny how the most annoying enemy in the whole game had to be dealt with twice at once. This was the only boss where I gave up and tried to search for some sneaky strategies online. I ended up learning from others and using fireworks to blow up the second ape. finally putting an end to this super annoying boss battle. I really don't want to think about it anymore, and I will never replay this fight in my lifetime. It was just too painful. Alright, that's pretty much the main bosses. I know there are some optional bosses that are insanely difficult, like the inner series bosses, but I haven't fought them yet, so I can't give my evaluation. I plan to finish this video first and then challenge them in New Game Plus. Alright, now let's talk about the difficulty rankings of the mini-bosses. I won't go into each one individually. First, the F-tier bosses are not worth mentioning. They serve as beginner tutorials and are not challenging at all. However, it's quite surprising that the Alchemy leader Shizu turned out to be ridiculously easy for a late-game boss. In the E-tier, there were a few bosses that gave me a hard time. I struggled with the Blazing Bull for a while, dying more than 10 times before realizing that I couldn't be aggressive and had to keep circling around, chasing it down slowly. The Chained Ogre was also a tough early-game mini-boss. Its grab attack had an incredibly wide hitbox, and I often thought I had dodged it, only to be caught anyway. It took some time to defeat it. Next is the Shinobi Hunter Enshin of My Sin, which I spent over half an hour trying to beat without success. Then a hint popped up on the screen, suggesting that the enemies in the 3-year-old storyline were too strong and that I should come back later. Apparently, I encountered it too early. I also struggled for a while with the Lone Shadow Longswords Man. The fighting area was incredibly small, and the camera often got stuck, making the battle quite painful. At first, I was clueless against the Lone Shadow Vilehand, not knowing that I could assassinate the minion around it. I stupidly fought it 1-on-2 for more than 10 attempts. After realizing I could take out the small enemies with stealth, it took some time before I finally defeated it. In the C-tier, the long-armed centipede giraffe was incredibly frustrating. Although its attack patterns were straightforward, the battlefield was extremely small, leaving no room for evading. I had to keep clashing blades with it, and without perfect parries, my posture quickly depleted. Once my posture broke, it meant death since nowhere to dodge in such small battlefield. This fight got me really mad. Alright, Ashina Elite. Wujai Narai Mizuo goes into the B tier for me, but the difficulty of this boss is a bit mysterious. Its moves are actually super simple, with just vertical slashes and occasional pushes. It's not very difficult to dodge. It's actually quite easy to learn the pattern. So why is it in the B tier? It's mainly because of its incredibly low margin for error. As far as I know, it should be the most powerful enemy in the entire game. When I fought it, I had around 16 vitality, which is not too little, but it could one-shot me directly. So, unless you resurrect, the margin for error is 0. You die from a single hit. Therefore, maintaining perfect avoidance of its attacks throughout the entire fight puts a lot of pressure on you. It heavily relies on your focus and reaction speed. Although I managed to defeat it in about half an hour, it was because I used fire attack, which significantly reduced the difficulty due to its ridiculously low tolerance and almost non-existent margin for error. It creates immense pressure, so I placed it in the B tier. Lastly, the boss that I found incredibly overpowering was the Snake Eyes Shurifuji. I'm sorry, but I really don't know how to explain just how difficult it was in words. All I can say is that I struggled for an extremely long time and couldn't defeat it no matter what I tried. Its attack pace was incredibly unique, with the cannon strikes sometimes fast, sometimes slow. I had no idea how to deflect them. The follow-up cannon shots after deflecting almost had no delay and were immediately fired. Overall, I felt like I would never fully understand its attack patterns. To me, Snake Eyes Shurifuji was even stronger than Game Ichiro. In the end, I managed to defeat it in a rather unexpected and unsatisfying way. I accidentally led it to a cliff, causing it to fall and granting me victory. It was a disappointing outcome after struggling with the boss for such a long time. So, that concludes my evaluations and experiences with the bosses in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. I want to point out again that there are still some bosses I haven't fought yet, and my rankings might change after completing all of them. I appreciate you watching today's video. And if you're interested in more game introductions and reviews, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Alright, see you next time.